Hey Bible lovers, I'm Tim Nichols, and I'm here to bring you a little bit of a different type of Nicholsworth today. Some of you have asked, how do you treat leather on your Bibles? Should you treat it? Is the natural oils in your hands enough? And actually, your hands don't produce oils. It's when you touch your face or your forehead or something like that when it gets oil on it. I decided to ask an expert. Vitaliy with SDG Rebinds knows a lot about archival leather and how to handle bookbinding leather, so I asked him a few questions on your behalf. Check it out. One question that I get a lot: how do I take care of my leather? And you've probably seen pictures where people try to do something and they ruin their Bible because they feel like they have to put some kind of leather treatment on it or they do something to it. So, how much validity is there to the fact that number one, your leather needs to be treated with something? And then number two, what types of leather should you avoid treating? Like we've already proven with my video that the fat gnat, you don't need to put any of that oil on it because it'll mess it up. And how much truth is it to just using it is really the best treatment? So kind of a three-pronged question there.
Yeah, so first of all, leather is a natural product that will eventually dry out. And we see this with if you get a vintage old Bible where leather hasn't been used, it'll just dry out and crack and break. So leather does require conditioning or moisture, otherwise it will dry out. What kind of a conditioning to use? Or actually, let's first talk about what leather is acceptable for leather conditioning. It needs to be leather that doesn't have any synthetic finish on top. For example, this is a rebind that I have of my own ESV PSR in a Sully goatskin. Sully goatskin is one of the popular Bibles for rebinding, and it has a pigmented finish, meaning that the color comes from a layer of pigmentation, almost kind of like painted on. And there are some other leathers that do have like a painted finish. This leather will not be able to accept any conditioning because the conditioner won't be able to penetrate into the leather. So first of all, it needs to be a leather that is not finished with some sort of layer of lacquer or pigment or paint that will prevent the absorption.
That means most of your factory Bibles are out on that, right?
It depends. A lot of the premium goatskin versions that I've seen, they are a natural finish. And with any conditioner, it's worth to always run a test. Maybe on like on the back in the corner where it's less visible, just to apply that conditioner and see if it absorbs. If the leather absorbs it, then it's good for conditioning. Except suede, like the leather that you have with Fat Nat, that's suede leather. I haven't looked into it. I know there's suede cleaners that are out there, but in terms of conditioning, I have not seen anything that would work, and it would just discolor it. So with that in mind, the other leathers that would accept is like this waxy pull-up Badalassi Carlo. It's a natural finish, cowhide or goat skin, where the color comes from the dyeing process itself. And so the leather doesn't have any layer on top of it to prevent the leather conditioner from penetrating and it being absorbed. Now, the conditioner that I like to use on my Bibles, I know I have right here, it's kind of got a bunch of oil on it. It's Otter Wax Leather Oil. And I like it because it is a completely 100% natural product. Stay away from anything synthetic. If you look at the ingredients and there's something sounding too scientific, probably avoid it. There's a bunch of good options out there with natural leather conditioners. I like the oil over a paste conditioner because it's a lot easier to apply a thin coat. I can just take a small rag, get it a little bit damp, and apply a very thin coat of conditioner on the leather or on the cover because you don't want to overdo it. With the paste, any paste conditioner, it's a lot easier to overdo and oversaturate. I would recommend starting slow, a very light coat. If it absorbs, you can add another one to see until the leather feels supple and kind of how premium leather should feel. Any excess can be wiped off with a clean cloth or a horsehair brush like this one to help buff it out. And leather doesn't need that much. I've seen people who have tried to condition and they overdo it.
Hmm.
They oversaturate it, and when you do that, the leather will darken significantly. Now, with any conditioner, the leather will darken a little bit, but it should even out with time and kind of under heat as the leather absorbs and the moisture evaporates a little bit. I would recommend starting with a thin coat, and it doesn't need that often. Like this Bible, I've had for over a year, and I've conditioned it once. So really, I would say, depending on usage, if it's in a case or a bag, the moisture will not escape as much. If it's left in a hot car or just out, it will dry out more. So, but I would say once every 3 to 6 months, a light coat or as needed will be helpful in that.
Right. And see, I've never conditioned any of mine. Part of it is just out of fear that it would, like, for example, this is the double shot. Would this be a good
Yeah.
candidate to receive the oil?
Yes, and all of my rebinds that I do with the leather that is able to accept conditioning, I condition before I put the cover on the Bible. So it goes out preconditioned kind of to set up for success in the future.
So this has been preconditioned.
Yes.
I couldn't tell. So I guess I just need to get over my nerves and just try one. And does it need to be veg tanned, or does chemical tans receive it as well?
Chrome tan will also receive it as long as it's not a pigmented finish or like a where the color actually comes from the dyeing process. Even chrome tan will accept it. If you're afraid of starting out, start on a darker Bible, like on a black Bible or a dark brown that will not discolor as much, and then just test it out, see how it accepts it. Starts with a very thin coat, just barely getting it on there, and see how the leather reacts, whether it absorbs or just stays on top of it, how the leather feels, and then you can kind of experiment with other leathers and see how that works out.
So for the average guy who doesn't know the difference between how a leather was processed, is there any tips on how to help us figure out which ones have that pigment in it and which ones are natural?
If they don't know exactly, it kind of just depends on how the leather feels. I know that's very subjective, but if it feels very natural and supple, that kind of almost has a little bit of squish to it, most likely it's a naturally finished leather. If it
Mm-hmm.
feels like there's a thin layer of paint, then it might be pigmented finish and won't accept. But the nice thing is you can try. And so even like on this Sully goatskin, if I put the leather conditioning on it and I see that it doesn't absorb, I can just wipe it off and it's back to being the same. So there's really no real danger from trying it on that type of leather. If it doesn't absorb, you just wipe everything off and it's back to the same. It shouldn't discolor it.
Okay.
Unless you've used some leather conditioner with chemicals that
Right.
might actually discolor the pigment, but natural conditioners shouldn't do that.
Okay. So basically, the best way to tell is just to try.
Yes.
All right. So show us that again, because and tell us the brand. I'm going to put a link to that in the video description.
The brand is Otter Wax, and it's the leather oil. So it's available on Amazon in smaller bottles. You don't have to get the big one. I've used it ever since my leather crafting hobby, and now with Bible rebinds, it doesn't discolor too much. It absorbs easily. It's easy to apply, much better than any paste that I've used. And it also gives it a really nice citrusy smell a little at first.
All right. Well, you've convinced me. I'm going to try it. Maybe you'll some other people because I've just been real hesitant to do it. And I'm going to try it. Like you said, I'm going to start off on a black Bible and see if it absorbs it or not. Because and the feel, don't underestimate the value of your advice of the feel, because you can touch Sully, you can tell it has that kind of stiff feel to it where you can just tell that it's gone through a different process. So that feel is important. And I'll go on record, Sully is one of my favorite leathers. People think I'm crazy, but I love the way it tools. I love how consistent it is. I love how many colors you can get it in. So I'm not saying it's a bad leather. I'm just saying that you can feel that there's something going on with that that's different than some of your natural finishes.
Yes, and especially with one other tip, maybe kind of to see how it's how the leather has been finished. If it is a lighter color, if you can see some natural imperfections in the leather, whether it's a scar or a mosquito bite or anything like that, then it probably doesn't have the pigmented finish. Like Sully is very consistent, like you said, in its finish and its color. And the reason they're able to offer like 500 colors is because it's all of the color comes from the pigmentation, not from the dye of
Yeah.
that's applied to the leather.
I will say something about Sully as well, is it's got awesome memory.
Yes.
Yeah, to train the yap, and just it's got awesome memory. I love it. That's one of the things I really love about the Badalassi, is it's got really good memory as well. And Horween has amazing memory. It's probably among the best. It's a little more
Hmm.
volatile. One thing I love about the pull up is that you can wipe off scratches. But with the Horween, that's not the thing. That wears like a boot or a shoe. And part of the appeal of the Horween is that you get that worn shoe look over the years.
Yeah, and since we're talking about leather conditioning is another way to hide some of the blemishes or the scratches and scuffs that appear on the leather. It will help it to cover it up in some way.
Well, I tell you what, I'm getting me some. I'm getting me some. I'm
I
trying
think,
it.
and I think that's going to be a video coming up soon for that you're going to do about that.
Yeah, and letting people see how it works, and maybe even if I make a mistake, show that as well. But put it on thin. Don't go overboard, and don't do it all the time. A couple times a year is probably adequate.
Yes.
So, is there any truth to the fact that using it is the best conditioning? Is there any truth to that?
I suppose there's some truth because your hands do develop some oils, but at the same time, your hands also get dirty. And so if your hands aren't always super clean, and we agree we don't always handle our Bibles with perfectly clean hands, or if we use lotions that don't have natural ingredients, that can also seep into the Bible. I've seen plenty of comments on Facebook where someone asks about how do you condition a Bible, and the first comment is like, just your regular usage with your hands will be enough. I would say that's not enough. That is enough to develop a patina and maybe develop a darker spot where you're holding it, but it's not enough to condition the whole Bible. And that's where the natural leather care items, like the leather oil, helps to condition the whole Bible. And sometimes you might even want to condition the inside liner,
Hmm.
depending on how that is, to leave the Bible open or put a piece of paper there to absorb any extra so it doesn't get into the actual pages. Your hands is not enough. It would need more for actual conditioning.
So, Vitaliy being the myth buster here.
I
Oh,
guess, yeah.
any other tips about leather care that the average person may or may not know that can help the longevity of their Bible? You pulled up that horsehair brush. What does
Yes. So the horsehair brush just helps to brush away any surface dirt. It helps to buff it out, take off any excess leather conditioner that's on there. To keep the longevity of the Bible, I would say just treat it nicely. Don't leave it out in the sun, like on the dashboard of your car. Don't just throw it around however you want. If you're putting it into a bag, be careful that you don't scratch it up. Just like with anything else, how you treat it, it'll last either a long time or a short time. Regular care, but not too much, and it should last a lifetime, really.
now? So with Secoto and with Capra granulosa, you put the conditioner on those. Will those likely darken?
With the conditioner that I use, it will initially darken, but once it dries out, it goes back to the color. But with any conditioner, anything that gets added into the leather, it will tend to darken it. So with time, it will become a little bit darker.
Okay.
But if you're adding a small coat every 6 months, I mean, it'll be 2, 3 years down the road when you'll see any significant change in the color, unless you're really using the Bible and it's getting a patina.
All right. Well, I hope that was educational for you, and I hope you learned a few things about it. Just make sure you put it on thin and test it in an area that's not likely to be seen. Also, test it on a Bible that may bother you the least if it does go wrong. More than anything, just don't overdo it. If you want your leather to last a long time, it is a good idea to condition it and to use an all-natural product like the Otter Wax. Anyhow, God bless you. Keep calm. Jesus on.